Magic, White and Black. The Science on Finite and Infinite Life. Containing practical hints for students of occultism by Franz Hartmann. Chapter 1. The Ideal. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. John 4:24. The highest desire any reasonable man can cherish, and the highest right he may possibly claim, is to become perfect. To know everything, to love all and be known and beloved by all, to possess and command everything that exists. Such is a condition of being that, to a certain extent, may be felt intuitively, but whose possibility cannot be grasped by the intellect of mortal man. A foretaste of such a blissful condition may be experienced by a person who, even for a short period of time, is perfectly happy. He who is not oppressed by sorrow, not excited by selfish desires, and who is conscious of his own strength and liberty, may feel as if he were the master of worlds and the king of creation. And in fact, during such moments, he's their ruler as far as he himself is concerned, although his subjects may not seem to be aware of his existence. But when he awakes from his dream and looks through the windows of his senses into the exterior world and begins to reason about his surroundings, his vision fades away. He beholds himself a child of the earth, a mortal form, bound with many chains to a speck of dust in the universe, on a ball of matter called a planet that floats in the infinity of space. The ideal world that perhaps a moment before appeared to him as a glorious reality may now seem to him the baseless fabric of a dream in which there is nothing real, and physical existence with all its imperfections is now to him the only unquestionable reality, and its most dear illusions the only things worthy of his attention. He sees himself surrounded by material forms, and he seeks to discover among these forms that which corresponds to his highest ideal. The highest desire of mortal is to attain fully that which exists in himself as his highest ideal. A person without an ideal is unthinkable. To be conscious is to realize the existence of some ideal. To relinquish the ideal world would be death. A person without any desire for some ideal would be useless in the economy of nature. A person having all his desires satisfied needs to live no longer, for life can be of no further use to him. Each one is bound to his own ideal. He whose ideal is mortal must die when his ideal dies. He whose ideal is immortal must become immortal himself to attain it. Each man's highest ideal should be his own higher spiritual self. Man's semi-animal self, which we see expressed in his physical form, is not the whole of man. Man may be regarded as an invisible power or ray extending from the spiritual sun to the earth. Only the lower end of that ray is visible, where it has evolved an organized material body, by means of which the invisible ray draws strength from the earth below. If all the life and thought force evolved by the contact with matter are spent within the material plane, the higher spiritual self will gain nothing by it. Such a person resembles a plant developing nothing but its root. When death breaks the communication between the higher and lower, the lower self will perish, and the ray will remain what it was before it evolved a mortal inhabitant of the material world. Man lives in two worlds, in his interior and in the exterior world. Each of these worlds exists under conditions peculiar to itself, and that world in which he lives is for the time being the most real to him. When he enters into his interior world during deep sleep or in moments of perfect abstraction, the forms perceived in the exterior world fade away. But when he awakes in the exterior world, the impressions received in his interior state are forgotten, or leave only their uncertain shadows on the sky. To live simultaneously in both worlds is only possible to him who succeeds in harmoniously blending his internal and external worlds into one. The so-called real seldom corresponds with the ideal, and often it happens that man, after many unsuccessful attempts to realize his ideals in the exterior world, returns to his interior world with disappointment and resolves to give up his search. But if he succeeds in the realization of his ideal, then arises for him a moment of happiness, during which time, as we know it, exists for him no more. The exterior world is then blended with his interior world. His consciousness is absorbed in the enjoyment of both, and yet he remains a man. Artists and poets may be familiar with such states. An inventor who sees his invention accepted, a soldier coming victorious out of the struggle for victory, a lover united with the object of his desire, forgets his own personality and is lost in the contemplation of his ideal. The ecstatic saint, seeing the Redeemer before him, floats in an ocean of rapture, and his consciousness is centered in the ideal that he himself has created out of his own mind, but which is as real to him as if it were a living form of flesh. Shakespeare's Juliet finds her mortal ideal realized in Romeo's youthful form. United with him, she forgets the rush of time. Night disappears, and she is not conscious of it. The lark heralds the dawn, and she mistakes its song for the singing of the nightingale. Happiness measures no time and knows no danger, but Juliet's ideal is mortal and dies. Having lost her ideal, Juliet must die. But the immortal ideals of both become again one as they enter the immortal realm through the door of physical death. But as the sun rose too early for Juliet, so all evanescent ideals that have been realized in the external world vanish soon. An ideal that has been realized ceases to be an ideal. The ethereal forms of the interior world, if grasped by the rude hand of mortals and embodied in matter, must die. To grasp an immortal ideal, man's mortal nature must die before he can grasp it. Low ideals may be killed, but their death calls similar ones into existence. From the blood of a vampire that has been slain, a swarm of vampires arises. A selfish desire fulfilled makes room for similar desires. A gratified passion is chased away by other similar passions. A sensual craving that has been stilled gives rise to new cravings. Earthly happiness is short-lived and often dies in disgust. The love of the immortal alone is immortal. Material acquisitions perish because forms are evanescent and die. Intellectual accomplishments vanish, for the products of the imagination, opinions and theories are subject to change. Desires and passions change and memories fade away. He who clings to old memories clings to that which is dead. A child becomes a man an old man a child. The playthings of childhood give way to intellectual playthings, but when the latter have served their purpose, they appear as useless as did the former. Only spiritual realities are everlasting and true. In the ever-revolving kaleidoscope of nature, the aspect of illusions continually changes its form. What is laughed at as a superstition by one century is often accepted as the basis of science for the next, and what appears as wisdom today may be looked upon as an absurdity in the great tomorrow. Nothing is permanent but the truth. But where can man find the truth? If he seeks deep enough in himself, he will find it revealed. Each man may know his own heart. He may let a ray of the light of intelligence into the depths of his soul and search its bottom. He will find it to be as infinitely deep as the sky above his head. He may find corals and pearls, or watch the monsters of the deep. If his thought is steady and unwavering, he may enter the innermost sanctuary of his own temple and see the goddess unveiled. Not everyone can penetrate into such depths, because the thought is easily led astray. But the strong and persisting searcher will penetrate veil after veil until at the innermost center he discovers the germ of truth, which, awakened to self-consciousness, will grow in him into a sun that illuminates the whole of his interior world. Such an interior meditation and elevation of thought in the innermost center of the soul is the only true prayer. The adulation of an external form, whether living or dead, whether existing objectively or merely subjectively in the imagination, is useless and serves only to deceive. It is very easy to attend to forms of external worship, but the true worship of the living God within requires a great effort of will and a power of thought, and is in fact the exercise of a spiritual power received from God. God in us prays to himself. Our business consists in continual guarding of the door of the sacred lodge, so that no illegitimate thoughts may enter the mind to disturb the holy assembly whose deliberations are presided over by the Spirit of wisdom. How shall we know the truth? It can be known only if it becomes revealed within the soul. Truth, having awakened to consciousness, knows that it is the God principle in man, which is infallible and cannot be misled by illusions. If the surface of the soul is not lashed by the storms of passion, if no selfish desires exist to disturb its tranquility, if its waters are not darkened by reflections of the past, we will see the image of eternal truth mirrored in the deep. To know the truth in its fullness is to become alive and immortal. To lose the power of recognizing the truth is to perish in death. The voice of truth in a person that has not yet awakened to spiritual life is the still small voice that may be heard in the heart, listened to by the soul, as a half-conscious dreamer listens to the ringing of bells in the distance. But in those that have become conscious of life, having received the baptism of the first initiation administered by the Spirit of God, the voice heard by the newborn ego has no uncertain sound, but becomes the powerful word of the Master. The awakened truth is self-conscious and self-sufficient. It knows that it exists. It stands higher than all theories and creeds and higher than science. It does not need to be corroborated by recognized authorities. It cares not for the opinion of others, and its decisions suffer no appeal. It knows neither doubt nor fear, but reposes in the tranquility of its own supreme majesty. It can neither be altered nor changed. It always was and ever remains the same, whether mortal man perceives it or not. It may be compared to the light of the earthly sun that cannot be excluded from the world, but from which man may exclude himself. We may blind ourselves to the perception of the truth, but the truth itself is not thereby changed. It illuminates the minds of those who have awakened to immortal life. A small room requires a little flame, a large room a great light for its illumination, but in either room the light shines equally clear in each. In the same manner the light of truth shines into the hearts of the illumined with equal clearness, but with a power differing according to their individual capacity. It would be perfectly useless to attempt to describe this interior illumination. Only that which exists relatively to ourselves has a real existence for us. That of which we know nothing does not exist for us. No real knowledge of the existence of light can be furnished to the blind. No experience of transcendental knowledge can be given to those whose capacity to know does not transcend the realm of external appearances. There is nothing higher than truth, and the acquisition of truth is therefore man's highest ideal. The highest ideal in the universe must be a universal ideal. The constitution of all men is built according to one universal law, and the highest ideal must be the same to all and attainable to all, and in its attainment all individuals become reunited. As long as the soul of man does not recognize the highest ideal in the universe, the highest one which he is able to recognize will be the highest to him. But as long as there still exists a higher one than the one he perceives, the higher will unconsciously attract him unless he forcibly and persistently repulses its attraction. Only the attainment of the highest ideal in the universe can give eternal and permanent happiness. For having attained the highest, there is nothing left that could possibly be desired. As long as there is still a higher ideal for man, he will have aspirations to reach it. But having reached the highest, all attraction ceases. He becomes one with it and can desire nothing more. There must be a state of perfection which all may reach, and beyond which none can advance, until the universe as a whole advances beyond it. All men have the same right to reach the highest, but not all have the same power developed. Some may reach it soon, others may lag on the road, and perhaps the majority may fall and have to begin again at the foot of the ladder. Each ripe acorn that falls from an oak has the inherent capacity to develop into an oak, but not each finds the same conditions for development. Some may grow, a few may develop into trees, but the majority will enter into decomposition to furnish material out of which new forms may be developed. The highest truth in its fullness is not known to man in the mortal form. Those that have attained to a state of perfect consciousness of infinite truth are not imprisoned in a limited form. They belong to a formless tribe. They could not be one with a universal principle if they were tied by the chains of personality. A soul expanded so that the prison house of flesh can hold it no more will require that prison house no longer. Flesh and blood is only required to shelter the spirit in the infancy of his development, as long as he has not attained full power. The clothes of skin were needed to protect him against the destructive elementary influence of the sphere of evil, as long as he could not rise above evil. Having attained the knowledge of evil and the power to subdue it, and having by the realization of the truth eaten from the tree of life and attained substantiality, he can protect himself by his own power and requires his clothes of flesh no longer. Imperfectly developed man, unless he has become degraded, feels intuitively that which is true but does not know the truth by direct perception. The externalist who reasons only from the plane of sensual perceptions is farthest from a recognition of the truth because he mistakes the illusions produced by his senses for the reality, and repulses the revelations of his own spirit. The philosopher, unable to see the truth, attempts to grasp it with his logic, and may approach it to a certain extent, but he in whom the truth has attained its own self-consciousness knows the truth because he is himself one with it. Such a state is incomprehensible to the majority of men, to scientists and philosophers, as well as to the ignorant, and nevertheless men have existed and exist today who have attained it. They are the true theosophos, but not everyone is a theosopher who goes by the name of theosophist. Nor is everyone a Christ who is called a Christian. But a true theosopher and a true Christian are one and the same, because both are human forms, in which the universal spiritual soul, the Christ or the light of divine wisdom, has become manifest.